one of the most, I was in Singapore actually a couple of days ago, and I was talking, taking part in a seminar on energy security and climate change and what policy changes. And over the Japanese problem kept on coming up and up. But there were some people who were just dismissing it. Now you look at that accident, there are so many reactors around. This is only 3 major accidents out of 400 reactors that are operating, and compare it with the road accidents. And I kept telling people, I say it's not the same thing. A nuclear accident is not the same as a road accident. How many people can die out of the worst road accident you can think of? Now, what about radiation itself when it happens? Even in Chernobyl, up to today, they have not resolved the number of people who are actually suffering from the after effects of Chernobyl. And we will never know, at least for the next 30, 40 years, how many Japanese actually pay the price of the accidents that are occurring now. So, and I think the other worry a lot of people have, maybe this is psychological. Radiation is something you cannot see. And I think people have an inordinate fear of the invisible. We can tackle the visible, but we find that psychologically and somehow we don't have a means of tackling the invisible. And that's why even a small amount of radiation is worrisome. And I think many of you will remember Bukit Merah, and now the New York article has come out and saying, and what we suspected all along, that the radiation issue had not been resolved in the Bukit Merah landfill site. And sure enough, I was told at one stage when they did an EIA of a factory around Bukit Merah, radiation levels were high. But we have no means of knowing because they were not published. This goes back to the question of transparency and accountability. So, I think, with those remarks, let me go to these questions that I put on the slides. First, I think people are using climate change as an excuse to launch the nuclear pandemic, I call it, because it's not only in Malaysia. It has been Vietnam is doing it, ASEAN is doing it, China, of course, has been going full stream for a long time. India has been doing it for quite some time. But the Malaysian public seems to be bombarded with these wonderful things on the virtues and necessity for nuclear energy. As if our electricity, you will have no more electricity in your house if there's no more nuclear reactors are built. They forget that even if you build the 2 nuclear reactors, they are only 2,000 megawatts. The current T&D grid for Peninsular Malaysia is 14,000 megawatts. We are talking of 2,000 megawatts if it's built in Peninsular Malaysia. Now, if you are talking of the future, you are talking in terms of, for example, 10, 15 years, the grid capacity will obviously be much bigger. Presumably, if you do not use energy more efficiently. But I will show you actually that we have a huge potential, as YB Elizabeth mentioned. We have a 40% reserve in our peninsular grid. That plus on top of the number of inefficiencies in our system. I'm sure Dame Chua will be facing towards the end of the year an energy efficiency bill also that is coming through, following up the renewable energy bill, in which the government is finally admitting we need to do energy efficiency. And they're finally now going to admit energy efficiency is not only for electricity, energy efficiency is also for the transport sector, because we're using massive amounts of fuel in the transport sector that's being wasted. So, we must remember when we are talking of energy here, we are only talking of electricity, because nuclear energy primarily is for electricity generation. Although it, of course, comes through the process of steam being generated by the reactors, but the steam is used to drive turbines which are not that efficient, and then they generate electricity. We are not using the steam directly. Now, and the point has already been made that there has been no open stakeholder consultation and no public debate. You remember the PM's on Facebook where he invited people for comments, and half the people, more than half the people were against nuclear. That's the only debate that occurred. And after that they decided they're going to go ahead. And now I'm told that even the Ministry of Energy is powerless because they've taken away the nuclear energy, nuclear power corporation and put it directly under the Prime Minister's department. That's why Peter Chin the other time at the press conference was shying away from answering any questions because he has no more jurisdiction on the nuclear issue. It's in the Prime Minister's direct hands. And And one asks the question, why? Why should we go under the Prime Minister? Is there a reason? Is it national security? Or is there something more to it? Something to be earned? Maybe. Perhaps one of those figures. So, I would argue that the Cabinet has made a fateful decision on the advice of vested interests, because that's the impression I've given, although we have not told when was the Cabinet decision made. But I have the next slide, please. Now, some burning questions. We talk so much about One Malaysia. Does One Malaysia give priority to full public consultation on defining a nuclear policy? Because there is a nuclear policy, but where was that debate and discussion? Because these reactors are pushed as part of the nuclear policy, which is supposed to cover more than that. It's supposed to cover research and development and other areas, but we only see the visible aspect is only this nuclear power reactors. And where the document, we know there also was a document, but the document has never been made public. I wonder whether any of the MPs have ever cited the document itself, and we don't even know what areas it covers. Then the question is mostly, and the Ministry of Energy, Green Technology and Water, why they're so gung-ho about the idea of nuclear? Because they are now, especially in the Ministry of Energy, with whom I've had some contacts, are thinking that the South Koreans have got all the solutions. They're moving towards South Korean technology. They claim the South Korean reactors produce very little waste, they are the most advanced, and so on and so forth. And the question also is, if you remember, I don't know how many of you have read your newspaper archives, this issue of nuclear was an old issue when TNB was still known as LLM, and the days when Leo Mogi was Minister of Energy, he and I were debating about nuclear. They had already talked about nuclear before Mahathir became Prime Minister. But after he became Prime Minister, somehow the whole issue, in fact the nuclear unit in LLM was disbanded. That's why they're now sitting, they say, we lost so many years. Otherwise we would have nuclear reactors here and there by now. So we have to get new people now trained, as if that's a wonderful thing that we missed out on. I don't mind having missed out on that. I don't know about you. Next, please. Now, my question is, can the proposed nuclear electricity actually enhance energy security? When we talk about energy, we talk a lot about energy security. And to me, energy security will be actually undermined. Look at what is happening in Japan. They only rely 30% on nuclear electricity. Of course, people will compare to France, 70% on nuclear. But the reason why France went for nuclear was not so much for the energy reason. They were very annoyed with the Americans controlling nuclear weapons. They wanted to set up their own nuclear weapons thing. And you notice there's a direct correlation between weapons and energy. Once you go into nuclear energy, you already have the ingredients to produce atomic weapons. That's why they're going after Iran, because they think Iran is going to use all these centrifuges and all that to produce the first Muslim bomb, atomic bomb. Pakistan actually has done that in a way, I would say, through the missiles and all that, but that's a phobia. So the question is, whoever goes into nuclear energy has the potential to develop nuclear weapons. And for all we know, that may also be behind the Malaysian government's mind. Because I couldn't understand when I was fighting the Bukit Merah issue, why the Malaysian government was so interested in storing thorium waste. Then I realized that the Indians actually have been trying to develop a thorium nuclear reactor. And then from there, the waste can also become, so it's a security issue. Just like the debate now going in Parliament between YB Pua and Zahid on nuclear security. Once you say national security, no more discussion after that. Everything is secret. And the question is, how can it curb global warming? The only way they say global warming, it does not produce for 1 kilowatt of electricity, it does not produce so much carbon. It's carbon neutral. But what about all the other effects? All the waste disposal. What about the effects on uranium mining itself? There's energy used in uranium mining. Transport itself, right? So, I have not seen the real evidence that it can really curb global warming. And can it be economically competitive after taking into account construction, decommissioning, and waste disposal costs? I've just been looking at the internet, some discussions going on among my friends, and they all seem to have agreed that 40 years is about the lifespan of a nuclear reactor. And now they're beginning to wonder, what about the reactors in the British nuclear submarines and the American nuclear submarines. They have almost all of them have reached 40 years. How are you going to decommission them? Nobody is talking about a defense issue, but the issue of reactor life is there. And these reactors in Japan were reaching the end of their life actually, some of them. So they were about to be decommissioned actually, but they asked for extension. I don't know whether McCoy is available. They actually approached the Japanese government and asked for extension of the 4-year or 5-year extension. So all these current reactors should have been decommissioned by now. So in a way, it was a problem waiting to happen because they were past the useful operating life, and now it's a problem area itself. And of course, many people argue, and this is a fact, many of the nuclear advocates do not want to admit, that the cost of decommissioning a nuclear plant is almost as much as that of building a nuclear reactor. So you must double the cost when you talk of the construction cost, you must write into it decommissioning cost as well.